Okay, thanks, Kate. Right, well, good morning, everybody. I'll say best wishes for the new year. I'm not sure I'd sort of want to say Happy New Year, but anyway, we'll go with the best wishes for the new year. And obviously welcome press and any members of the public who are listening in this morning. Before we sort of get into the meeting, I just obviously want to make a few remarks and certainly make reference to a couple of meetings that I've been involved in. I will go into more detail in my opening remarks, but I did attend the other day a briefing session for primary head teachers, which was led by Andy Lancashire and Anna Hartley, the public health officer, head of public health, and it was a really, really good meeting and reflected a great deal about where we are now in terms of the support that is given to places. So it was very, very impressive how that went, and equally I also was able to sat in on a Build Our Futures meeting before Christmas. So I'll go into more details about that. Right, so I think reading through the minutes of my opening remarks on the 26th of November, it's difficult to comprehend how things have changed since then. And certainly there's no doubt about it that we are definitely living through history. And once again, we have to ensure that our young people are cared for and supported in the best possible way, and that all resources we have are used to that end. And I think I did certainly pick up on one comment from Anna Hartley, who made comment to me the other day about that there is a distinct awareness that it is having an impact on young people's mental health. So this is something that we certainly need to be continually vigilant on, both through our families and through the community, and obviously through schools and children's services. And I know from my conversations, briefings and observings of me from all sections of CYP and public health, I have great confidence in the leadership, vision and management of our children's and young people's service. Yes, there is still work to be done, projects to finish and initiatives to be developed, but we have a team that is able to deliver on those objectives that were set after the Ofsted inspection in 2018. I think the events of the last 9 months have tested our service, and this has responded well. Schools have been supported, head teachers who've been in the eye of the storm know they have support, families and children have been supported, not just by phone but by direct contact has been maintained, and that is something which is so important at these times. Staff have had to deal with many challenges to ensure families, children and young people have remained safe, and it's a testament to the leadership of the service that the development work has not stopped. On Saturday 28th of November, I was able to sit on a Build Our Future Summit, which was a very successful conference and gave me, along with all the other adults, a real positive insight into how young people think and view their futures, and it was a privilege. So thank you to all those who organised and ran it on the day. Certainly since the second week in December, head teachers and teachers have been faced with even more challenges, culminating what many must have thought on the last couple of days of term as being the end of the world. Yes, I saw the briefing documents and the guidance that were sent to schools explaining how to conduct the tests. But yet again, schools rose to the challenge, and I know the Director of Public Health reacted quickly to give much needed support and guidance. However, as you all know, that came to naught. Instead, schools have now risen to the new challenge of providing online learning, which I can tell you is no mean feat. Some of these lessons are being delivered already from home, others from classrooms, and some with parts of classes in the classroom, and the rest being taught remotely. And I'm sure there's no manual anywhere for that. And I can certainly still remember having to prove I needed a new box of cosmic chalk. Now, I suspect that only me and Andy Taggart will know what that means. The next few months are going to see even more challenges. Everyone is relieved that the DfE finally saw sense and cancelled the exams at all levels. Sadly, it's inevitable that many of us saw early last term as attendance figures started to emerge and infection rates amongst older pupils increased. It took too long to be recognised at the top, so schools will now have to ensure all exam groups get appropriate grades. I think over Christmas, an amazing amount of work was carried out by many individuals and groups across the district, worked tirelessly to ensure all our children had the best festive period they could have. Now I've asked Councillor Kath Scott to provide an update on what happened. So Kath, can you give your report, please?
Yeah, thank you, David, and Happy New Year, everybody. Myself, like a lot of other people, have been volunteering in the community to help the people that are having to self-isolate and more vulnerable or in need. And one of those organisations I've been working with is Airedale Food and Baby Bank. And I've worked closely with Joe Parkin, who's Neighbourhood Coordination and Engagement Officer from Wakefield Council. So we work closely with Wakefield Council, WDH and other organisations. But Joe contacted me regarding it's called Mission for Christmas from Pulse Radio, about the possibility of gifts for children for Christmas, and did I know of any children that might benefit from a gift at Christmas. So I identified 36 children, and Joe went back to Pulse Radio and said, could they offer gifts for 36 children? And they said they'd try their best to accommodate our requests. And we didn't know what would happen. And I know other people and other councillors across the community have also benefited from this Mission Christmas from Pulse Radio. But we then, they rang us on the 15th of December, or they rang Joe on the 15th of December to say that the gifts were ready. Joe went through to Leeds and she collected 6 full sacks of gifts, which we were absolutely over the moon with, because this were more than what we expected. Then later that day we got another call to say, could we take gifts for 200 children? So Joe was liaising with me throughout this, and it's Lisa from Burn Media who had contacted Joe to say this. So we then or Joe did, she contacted street scene manager John Allen. He sent 2 street scene operatives and a Luton truck to do the collection. Joe went with them. They filled the truck with gifts. Joe filled her car. Then, when Joe came back to Airedale with all these toys, she said, Kath, can you go back and take somebody else with you? So myself and Mike Dixon, who was chair of Airedale Neighbourhood Management, who run the food bank, we both went back to Leeds, filled both our cars. So we'd got over £20,000 worth of gifts from Pulse Radio Mission Christmas, which was absolutely fantastic. I then rang Stephen Crofts and advised him. This was on the Friday before Christmas. This was the 18th of December. So we worked, myself and the other volunteers worked hard to put it into age-related, possible gender, crafts, cars, whatever gifts there were, we put it into different piles. Stephen Crofts then I asked him to contact other organisations, with the social workers, youth workers, anybody he could think of. So he did. He contacted the NHS, youth workers, so anybody he could think of, and other organisations, other charities that would benefit from this fantastic gift from Pulse Radio. He did that. We organised for the people to come on the Tuesday, and everybody was absolutely over the moon with the gifts. So these gifts were, it was 740 gifts altogether, and over £20,000 worth of gifts. And these were shared out amongst children and young people in our communities across this side of the district and wider. To help people's Christmas. It was absolutely fantastic, the people that came together, and this was late Tuesday when they got the gifts, so they were taking them back to work and then giving them out. So this was just a phenomenal amount of gifts, and I had to say thank you to Joe for contacting me in the first place and contacting Pulse Radio and everybody who donated gifts to this cause, because it's helped a fantastic amount of children over Christmas. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Kath, for that. I must admit, when Kath was telling me over Christmas about this, I thought it was something that really did have to be made public, because I think it was a fantastic response. And I think in terms of the way in which everybody in the council sort of came together to be able to ensure that all those gifts went out is phenomenal, and really reflects on what a great council that we've actually got and how it is supporting the community. So thanks for that, Kath. Agenda item 2, which is apologies, Karen. Now we've got Keith Garforth, who's having connection problems, and Usman Ali. Is there anybody else, Karen?
No, I've not received any more, Chair.
Okay, right. Thanks a lot. So we'll start then. Right. Any declarations of interest, please, from members? Okay. Right. So. Agenda item number 4, minutes of the Children's, Young People and Skills Committee, 26th of November 2020, which is obviously seems a lifetime ago. Can somebody please, who was present at the last meeting, approve the minutes as a correct record? I've certainly gone through and I've found nothing that's amiss.
Move them, Chair.
Right.
Second them, Chair.
Thank you, sure. Thank you very much.
Can we just make sure that my name's added on, that I was present at the last one?
Of course, Kath. Yes, you did make that comment the other day. Yeah, make sure, please, Karen. Otherwise, there will be trouble possibly towards the end of the municipal year. Thanks a lot. Right. So there are no urgent items. So we can go on to agenda item number 6, which is the improvement plan quarterly update, which is you'll find on agenda items pages 11 through to 22. Right, can I welcome Beate? She will be giving a PowerPoint presentation, so just to give her a few seconds to put that up on the screen. Right, the report is going to include in the agenda papers the Ofsted focus visits and recent service developments. This includes the improvement boards identify progress in relation to each of the 3 improvement programme priorities, such as 60% of adults were judged good or better in September, the highest rate achieved so far, and placement stability for children in care is improving. Beate, are you ready now to go?
Yes, except I do not seem to be able to get the presentation up on the screen. I don't know whether I don't have permission to do so. So if somebody else could do that for me, but if not, the presentation really is just taking people through the report. So you probably don't need to see the presentation in front of you in any case. If it's okay, I will just proceed by giving you some highlights from the report that people have had in advance of the meeting.
Yep, that's fine, Beate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So the report, as we do on a quarterly basis, gives you an update on some of the key achievements in the area that, in the sort of key area that have underpinned our improvement plan. And they are outlined as children in need of help and protection, children in care and care leavers, and strategic leadership. It then takes you on to the areas where we're currently focusing improvement work in line with our improvement plan. And it then also gives you a brief update on the Ofsted focus visits, which is very much linked to this as an external view around our own self-assessment and the improvements we've made. So in the first check section, in terms of achievements around help and protection, further improvements in the MASH, which can be seen in improved performance, but also in improved decision making, as recognised by Ofsted when they visited. More work in, we're hoping that the new phone system will absolutely support that and should be ready by the end of this month. Generally, again, this will be picked up in the vital signs reports and the audit feedback. Our audit outcomes continue to improve, so you will know that we do a programme of Audits, detailed case file audits are one element of that, and we rate those cases in the same grade as Ofsted. Now, 60% were at the last analysis were judged as good, which is a significant improvement, and now the largest percentage of cases, where that was very much previously the requires improvement cases. Lots of other developments now starting to be in bed, including the engagement with strategy discussions, the fact we've now launched the inclusion panels and the cluster arrangements. And again, there will be other speakers later on giving a bit more detail. We know that we've got more work to do around really embedding understanding and impact of our actions in response to neglect. So that is a key focus for us at the moment. Towards the end of last year, we were able to really start some significant training activity on that. It will be impacted again by the lockdown, but we'll just need to assess how exactly we need to change that to make sure we don't lose momentum. In terms of Wakefield Families Together, I've reported previously that we have 3 strands of work. 2 are now being implemented following successful pilots. They are the team around the early years and the team around the school. We're now piloting the 3rd strand of work, which is the team around the young person and the transition of vulnerable young people into adulthood. That will be completed by March, and so we're hoping again that we'll be able to then implement from there. And as you all know, we have paid a lot of attention to children's attendance at school as one key mechanism on keeping a line of sight on children, as well as for all of our young children to ensure that they get the education they need despite the difficult circumstances. So those have been some of the key activities and achievements in the last quarter in the realm of help and protection. In terms of children in care, also some significant achievements, but still some work to do. So the first item around adoptions and special guardianship orders. What we obviously want to do for every child in care is to make sure they have a good route out of care where they can be part of stable family arrangements, and adoption and and special guardianship order are 2 key ways of achieving that for some of the children. So we have significantly increased numbers of children who have been able to access those routes. We're doing a lot more and understand the emotional health and well-being of children in care a lot more. Again, very positive comments from Ofsted now around children in care being able to access both emotional well-being services but also CAM services. Linked to that, fewer children are having multiple placement moves. So this is the stability factor that is, again, very important, trying to really get stability for children in care, both in terms of their placement education. More to do on the care leaver service that's been recently restructured, is now called the Next Step service. Again, if you've read the Ofsted letter, it commented on the fact, yes, there's more to do, but actually there's a real optimism and a real energy within the service who can see that this really is the way to go, and this will make a significant difference. The care leaver service will not hold those young people's cases until they get to 18. But they will join social workers when children reach 16 and 17. So there will be a period of joint working and handover, and then hopefully much improved support when children reach adulthood and become care leavers. And finally, some comments around strategic leadership. So the what I've already described in terms of the progress we're making around Wakefield Families Together, I think it's really significant, and it's really starting to lead to different ways of working that this year we really need to start to embed and roll out. At the next cabinet meeting, we have a report which describes how we are ensuring we actually have an integrated arrangement for strategic leadership as well around this. So we will have a new service director post who will bring together both health and council services into a virtual team to make sure that that integration works not just at the front line but also at the strategic level. We've started the senior leadership visits again virtually. I think we were hoping we might be able to get out to teams more. But even if we can only do it virtually, it's been a really good way of keeping in touch with the front line. And finally, just the fact that we were able to successfully organise and carry out the visit Ofsted had with the authority at the end of last year was really positive. The areas that we're particularly focusing on in terms of improvement is still around levels of referrals and re-referrals. So there is still something about the type of referrals and the frequency they come into the MASH where we need to do more work. We do think that if we can embed the team around the early years, embed the team around the school, the difference will then be that any professional who is concerned can have a problem-solving discussion with other professionals in those meetings. So it may be that firstly, people are reassured about a joint approach to dealing with those children, supporting those children, making sure that the right help is available to them, will just mean that there is no need to make a referral into the MASH because actually there is a good plan in place and people are working together. This is not to say or in any way to encourage people not to refer to the MASH if that's necessary. People must still refer child protection concerns to the MASH. But if the MASH only receives the right sort of referral that they can respond to, then again, they will be much more effective because they will be focusing on the work that they need to be involved with. So those are, so there is a lot of auditing work, a lot of learning work around what's happening in terms of referrals and re-referrals. But in terms of the development, we think that the team around the school and the team around the early years will actually also set a longer term path that will be very helpful here. I've already talked about the work we're now doing on neglect. Our own self-assessment and Ofsted's assessment is that our responses to child abuse in terms of physical abuse and sexual abuse is very robust now. And they could see that our processes for that are working well. But neglect, of course, is a much more difficult area because it's such a continuum of where parenting that is just not quite good enough actually flips over into harmful parenting because of neglect. It's much more sophisticated, judgments to be made, and much more needs much more of a partnership approach. So we're doing a lot of work on that at all sorts of levels, but we're not quite there, and that's really what we're focusing on. And finally, just to mention that we know, and Ofsted told us as well, that our assessments now are largely consistently better across the board. So you may remember this was one concern at the last time we had Ofsted, and again we wouldn't have disagreed with that at that point in time, that we had some good assessments, but they were largely not as good as they needed to be across the board and consistently good. This time Ofsted found that we had really developed that, and I think the letters talks about at least acceptable now in terms of assessment. So really telling us that we had now at least reached a consistency of a minimum standard for all assessments, many of them much better than that. In terms of the plans for children, so after you have an assessment, what you would expect is that there will then be a plan in place for the child, agreed with parents, agreed with partners, about what needs to happen to address the issues raised in the assessment. So you've got to get your assessments right first to make sure you pick up the right things within the plans. So very often, the quality of the plans follows the quality of assessments. The message was that Ofsted could see some really good plans. In fact, the word outstanding was used in the feedback, but they could also see some plans that weren't as good as they need to be. So that is our focus now, that we get the same improvement in practice and consistency on plans that we've managed to achieve in terms of assessment, whilst continuing obviously to also work on continuous improvement of assessments. Which then just leads me to a very short reference to Ofsted, because in many ways Ofsted's feedback was very much in line with our self-assessment and in line with what I've reported. It was really good to see that Ofsted felt we had responded extremely well to the crisis, that relationships between partners were good. Relationships with school had really enabled the authority to keep a good line of sight on vulnerable children. Commented positively on the MASH and commented positively on the attention that is now being paid to physical and mental health of children and young people. Children and young people feeling listened to and involved in service planning, and generally the right children being brought into care. So the really giving us some assurance that the foundations for a safe service are in place. The areas that we again wouldn't disagree with need additional attention. I've already talked about plans and complex neglect cases, but also more work, which again is our current focus, around personal education plans, to make sure they're really ambitious and not just covering the basics, and also around really stepping up to the next level in terms of the offer for our care leavers, to make sure that they really feel that that we are good corporate parents to them. Finally, I suppose with the new lockdown, we haven't had any feedback yet on how that changes Ofsted's way of operating into this year. The original plan was that Ofsted would restart their inspection activity in April, and that we would normally now expect a full inspection sometime next year. We may be offered another monitoring visit around care leavers. We can have those discussions with Ofsted, because we may want a bit more feedback before we have a full inspection visit. But it's felt very much like a joint endeavour, really based on a degree of confidence that we were addressing the issues that Ofsted would also want us to address. And with that, I've taken you through my presentation without you having been able to see it, but I think it did, in any case, follow very closely the report you have in front of you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, thank you.
Right, yeah, thanks, Beata. Yes, I did. Obviously, we had a copy of the presentation, so was able to sort of follow it through. So, yeah, thanks for that. I think one of the strengths of an organisation is the fact that it is able to say these are our strengths and these are our weaknesses, and this is what we're doing about our weaknesses, because obviously Ofsted are very keen on the triangulation in terms of ensuring that all those facets are sort of covered, and certainly different things that when we're doing our work and we're picking up on things, it's very clear to say that both the organised children's services organisation and Ofsted are picking up the same things. So I think that is a very positive thing. I'd just like to pursue maybe one comment or area that you were talking about, which was on the neglect aspect of the work. To what extent is it the case that are there enough resources in place to be able to ensure that we can challenge neglect and obviously put procedures in place for it? And secondly, in terms of the partnerships that you refer to, could you sort of expand a little bit and say, in terms of how far wide does that partnership go in terms of the different organisations that sort of work with Wakefield? Thanks, Beate.
Yeah. So the Safeguarding Partnership really is a statutory body that has the responsibility to ensure that partnership arrangements are strong around any type of abuse. Neglect is one of the priorities for the Safeguarding Partnership. So the Safeguarding Partnership has, in line with its legal obligation, got 3 key statutory partners, and that's the police, health services, so providers and commissioners, but led by the CCG, and council service. So you have myself, the commander, the district commander, and the chief nurse as the key leaders on that. But it's got a much wider reach than that. So it works with all organisations in the district and guides all organisations in the district, including voluntary organisations around their safeguarding duties. So the training we deliver on neglect and the processes we agree with all of the partners are overseen by those key organisations. So the training, we would have, if you like, an internal arm where we make sure that our social work academy and our learning academy trains our own staff. But we're very closely linked with the partnership training function. So any partner can access training through the Safeguarding Partnership as well, and they're all giving the same messages around neglect. When Vicky talks a bit more about the vital signs report, she may want to talk a little bit more about what that means in practice and what some of the training looks like. But certainly the messages we're getting from the staff who've already undergone the training is that it is very positive, well received, and good take-up across the whole range of partner agencies.
Beate, does that therefore include organisations like WDH?
Yes. It does. Stephen, are you able to add anything more specific on that? I'm just trying to recall in terms of the Safeguarding Partnership on the range of organisation on the learning subcommittee. Vicky's
just saying yes. Do you want to hand over to Vicky?
I'm struggling, so she's wanting.
Sorry for throwing that one at you, Beate.
Not at all.
I didn't think you were struggling at all, Beate. It's just that I can probably add something, I think. So, just to try and be clear for members, what we've done just last year is develop our own bespoke neglect training programme. And we've launched that for social care, early help and education and inclusion staff, so the CYPS workforce within the council. But we're also working with the partnership now to roll out something very similar, but but slightly more generic for staff from different disciplines and different backgrounds. And that will be available across the whole partnership, including colleagues from housing. So the two offers will mirror each other, but will just be tailored slightly differently to deal with the different skill sets, I guess, of the staff involved. Does that address the question, David?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vicky. Thanks.
Okay.
Right, I'll go on to Celia, please. You're the first one to pose a question. Celia, over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Right, yes. This is actually about a different area from neglect, but actually there's many sort of associations, if you like. We know that many people are having huge problems with mental health issues at the moment, and obviously that includes children. So it's exceedingly good to hear about the improvements in the CAM service for children. And I also remain aware of what was earlier said from Anna Hartley about the massive increase in problems for children as well. So I just wanted to focus on that for a couple of minutes, but I particularly would like to know how that's actually been achieved. Where's that come from? Because there was always traditionally huge problems with mental health issues for children and not being able to provide enough resources. So I just wondered if somebody could outline, how that's been achieved, and also congratulations as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's been I suppose there is a number of strands of work, but I think it's fair to say that the CCG in particularly have led a significant sort of improvement and transformation piece of work to look at the pathways. And one of that is around sort of the partnership, making sure, a little bit like social care, it's to make sure that where as a partnership we can help and support children early, then we do that, rather than putting children on the CAMS waiting list where they might then stay for a long time, and when they get to the top of the list, actually it might not be quite the right pathway for them anyway. So we've done a lot of work's been done to make sure the right children are referred to CAMS. Some very significant investment made in the some of the sort of earlier prevention programs, including Future in Minds, including COOTH. In terms of the lockdown, there's also been some government funding available for a lot of work within schools and the trainer programs, so that we can put a lot more informal early help in place. But then also some significant investment in the resource overall. So I mean, it may be that members might want to look at a future time, but actually the waiting times now have significantly reduced. So we had up to 52 weeks a couple of years ago. We're significantly down now, within quite reasonable timescales that children are getting help. So I think it's been a partnership effort, but a real focus by colleagues in the health sector to achieve that as well. And I was really pleased actually that Ofsted recognised that is now, certainly for children in care, is considered to work so well that it's not really an issue for us anymore. In fact, children are receiving a good service now. It's also worth mentioning that it is one of the 4 priorities within the children's plan, emotional well-being. So as a partnership, we've paid quite a lot of attention to this, and it's one of the areas that we think Wakefield, that I suppose Wakefield Families Together brings the whole emotional well-being agenda into the team around the school discussion. So very much around looking at vulnerabilities, emotional well-being, school inclusion, all at the same time, so we can make sure we're really providing the right support to children. Andy might, if it's of interest, might want to just talk a little bit about what the Educational Psychology Service have done in terms of the national welfare return to school to education programme, if that's of interest, but it may go a little bit far for the scope of this discussion. I'll be guided by the chair.
Right, Steve, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just a really quick comment. I think Beata's sort of covered most of it there, definitely, in terms of the new investment we've seen, both nationally, the priority nationally, and how that's rolled out in terms of investment into services locally, particularly the primary intervention end of things, and the prevention and early intervention type services. We've also seen investment, I think, at the other end of the spectrum, as it were, in terms of the sharp end and children and young people in crisis, where we've seen new funding and investment into crisis response services, enhanced home-based treatment type services, a new team operating over 7 days a week. So I think also at that end of the spectrum, part of an overall national priority to put more into children's mental health, we've seen a real growth and development of the services for children and young people in crisis too. So I just want to add that to what Beata's covered.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Celia, do you want to come back on anything?
Not really. I just think it's fantastic to hear these things, particularly in the difficult times we're in. It makes me feel so good to hear all of that, actually, because I used to be in CAMS myself, and so I'm really pleased. Thank you.
I think I'd like to obviously add a couple of comments. I think certainly, I think in a briefing document that Anna provided for me after a series of questions I asked, certainly mental health amongst young people is one thing that had really come through from the first lockdown, and so I think a really important focus on that is clear. And certainly it was things that came out from the conference, obviously, that I was able to sort of sit in on in November last year, that sort of young people have been talking about that. And if you listen over the last few days to the way young people, when they've been interviewed on television about things like exams and that, they are clearly raising questions, and they are challenging everybody who's involved in children's services to ensure that we give them the full support that's required of them. But I think the second thing I'd like to say is that when obviously I came into this role, I was given the opportunity by the LGA, the Local Government Association, to be mentored by another local authority, which was Nottingham. And I think the first time that when I went down there, I'd given them a shopping list of things that we wanted to look at, and CAMS was one of them. And I can remember at that time that I was sort of given these figures, and I was sort of looking at what our figures were, and it was like, wow, they are doing a good job. But now I can sort of say, I'm looking at the figures that we've got, and they are very similar to the figures that Nottingham were doing, which was doing very well. So I think that CAMS particularly, and mental health, has come a long way. So I think that is really important. I think we've done a real good job on that. Stephen, wanted to say something else?
No, I've just put a comment in that I think we've got a substantive overview and scrutiny agenda item in April where we're going to focus on children's mental health, and we've got colleagues from health services joining us.
Right, thank you for that, Stephen. Right, Andy, question from you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, and congratulations, Beata, for this continued very positive success and progress. The question really is to do with in the findings, it's in the third paragraph, it's to do with the comments about the police and the notifications about incidents of domestic violence. And the reason for asking is the very surprising news that we got about Greater Manchester Police, where they'd been placed in special measures because of the 80,000 crimes not being recorded, a significant proportion being domestic abuse. So the question really, and I'm sure it's a positive one, but just in terms of clarity, what's the situation with regard to Wakefield District, and how confident are you and the authority in the current level of reported domestic issues affecting children and young people? Because hopefully our figures and your actions won't be distorted by something that has been horrendous, obviously in Manchester.
I think to an extent they're probably different sides of a coin. So I can't comment on the sort of police internal processes. Our experience within children's services and the way we're working with the police, obviously, you know, we're based in the police station, and relationships and dialogue is very, very good and very positive. But the police expectation is that any concern they've picked up around, so any call out they've had around domestic abuse where children might be part of that household or might be involved, are communicated to the MASH, and are also communicated to schools and health professionals through Operation Encompass. So the bit about the dialogue to make sure the people who might be seeing those children or might be in contact and understand what that child might have experienced yesterday or last night is known by, for example, schools, and they can then support and react. And that is a real positive, that the relevant people are really kept in the loop with what's happening in children's lives and to look out for the potential impact on children. We have no indication that we don't get that information. On the contrary, we think that information is passed through really well. Where it becomes difficult is then what we would expect as a social care part of the system is of every partner, not just the police, but of every partner then to make a judgment whether an incident has reached a threshold that would warrant a referral to the MASH. So a little bit like what I've described with any partner. If you're worried about a child, you are expected to take some actions that you can yourself to keep children safe, in the sort of in the spirit of safeguarding is everybody's business. The police are responding to our wish to make a judgment before things are passed to the MASH, but also an expectation from their own inspectorate to more or less make sure that social care know about all of these incidences. So it's quite a difficult one to negotiate, and we are doing some more work on that to make sure we're getting it right and we're not having unintended consequences of a blanket policy on parts of the system that then might become overwhelmed. I hope I've explained that in a way that makes some sense. So to summarize, I think we have no reason to believe that we are not becoming aware of any domestic abuse incident the police are experiencing that might affect a child, so that the universal partners can take the right action to support those children. We're doing more work, and that is what the Ofsted letter refers to, on making sure that that doesn't mean the MASH becomes overwhelmed, because there's a difference what the MASH needs to do or needs to know, and what generally partners and those that have direct work.
Right, thanks, Beate. Just one other question from me from the Ofsted report, which is on agenda page 18, which is about the range, quality and availability of suitable accommodation for care leavers, including semi-independent accommodation. Could you maybe expand a little bit on that?
I wonder if I could ask Vicky to pick this one up.
Yeah, thanks, Beate.
Thanks.
David, just repeat the question for me if you would.
Yeah, it's on the on agenda page 18 or of the regarding the Ofsted letter, or page 8 on the Ofsted letter. It talks about what needs to improve in this area of social work practice. And it talks about the range, quality and availability of suitable accommodation for care leavers, including semi-independent accommodation?
Okay, so I think members are aware that we've done an awful lot of work actually already on this. In particular in Wakefield, we've put in place, as you know, an additional 10 care leaver flats, and they're the council owned and managed properties that are part of our estate. So we've already done that. We've also worked really hard with Wakefield District Housing to try to improve sort of the routes out of care for young people, where they are capable of living independently and acquiring their own tenancy. I think what we know is it's that need for independent tenancies that really is still the sticking point. So this is really an issue around availability of housing, both private tenancies, but also social tenants, social tenancies, secure tenancies generated by our social landlords around the district. So there's a programme of work, colleagues, in place to try to ensure that we can maximise the availability of accommodation for children and young people over 18-year-olds leaving care who are capable and able to live on their own, in their own tenancies, but perhaps sometimes with help. We've been successful, I think, in agreeing the right pathways. We've got a number of young people who've been considered by the Housing Needs Panel. The sticking point really is, again, about availability of accommodation, but we're working with that on that with our corporate colleagues and, as I say, WDH. So it's an ongoing piece of work.
Right, thank you. Stuart, you've got a question.
Yes, some of that's been answered. A comment about the domestic abuse thing that Andy raised, but also just want to mention about homelessness and the 16 to 17-year-olds. I noticed in this report it's mentioned, and also and then I welcome the Wakefield homelessness and rough sleeping strategy, that no 16 to 17-year-olds are homeless are now placed in hotel accommodation. So it was just a question about, is the accommodation they're being placed in suitable? I'm sure it is, but what's the reassurance and support for those people now they're being placed in other accommodation? Because I know there was some comment made by the Children's Commission last September about these issues. So just around that reassurance of the support they get under the joint working protocol for those children who are finding themselves homeless.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably talk to that again. It's Vicky. Sorry. We're an awful lot more confident than we were, I think, in our working relationships and the arrangements we've got in place around the assessment of young people when they present as homeless, and then the routes onto accommodation for them. So we've recently carried out some audit work in this regard, and that told us that we were working better together, that our assessments were more robust, and you'll know that the routes out of homelessness for children who find themselves there is either that they come into local authority care or that they find accommodation with help from the services, and that's an assessment dependent upon their own wishes and feelings and also their level of need, I guess, at the time that they're seen. But as you know, we're no longer placing children in bed and breakfast accommodation. Children do have other accommodation options, and the issue that's helped to resolve that, I guess, most significantly is that we created the 3 what we call crash pads. So we now have emergency accommodation that children access throughout that assessment period, so that they have somewhere to stay until we find them the right place for their medium and longer term housing needs to be met. Does that answer the question, or is there something further that you wanted?
Stuart?
No, Vicky, yeah, no, it's really helpful, is that? And okay. I was thinking about that immediacy bit of that in between is the a real crucial time, because once lost at that point, it's more difficult as time goes on. But that initial sort of engagement point is really important. So that's really reassurance. Thank you. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to say there isn't still an issue around availability of accommodation. I think that's what we're seeing for care leavers. But what we do have now, which is really very helpful, is that that emergency accommodation. We've got the three bed sits that we're using, and we have found that although they can be full quite regularly, that's sufficient to meet our need.
Right.
Thanks, Vicky. And Chair, if I just make comment on the domestic abuse and referrals into the MASH. I know this is a challenge across, and I know partly I think this sits in the description or the thresholds in working together. I'm just the report mentioned about poor quality of referrals from the police. I was wondering if is that being addressed back to the police at Wakefield.
Do you want? I'm happy to pick that up as well. Yes, it is. We've been working with the police on this throughout the last year. There is an issue, I think, nationally. I don't think this is just a Wakefield problem. I think it's important to say that perhaps the guidance for police forces and the guidance for those of us involved in safeguarding functions don't always easily correlate with each other. And what the police would say is that they feel that they are obliged to refer to social care every incident of domestic abuse, however minor. And I think the working together guidance would set out a different principle, really, that this has to be about exercising one's judgment and understanding when a service is needed. So I think that's really the issue that the Ofsted letter is reflecting on. Locally and I think regionally, we've begun some discussions to try to unpick this problem. And at the moment, we have a pilot running around the joint screening of domestic abuse referrals, providing some clear guidance and feedback to police colleagues in live time, so that hopefully within the next sort of few months we will resolve a better position, I guess, without the need for a consistent joint screening of everything. So it is a priority for us. The police are working well with us, I think, but it is an issue which is it's an issue which befuddles many local authority areas, I guess, is what I will say. But we're confident we'll find a solution.
Thanks, Vicky. And that is, you made the other point for me that I know it's not a Wakefield issue, which is an issue across other parts of West Yorkshire and nationally, where some policies seem to not quite align at the moment.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Right, thank you for bringing that up, Stuart. Much appreciated. Celia, you've got a question.
Yeah, it's just the almost the last paragraph, I think, actually, of the letter from the inspector. I'm just wondering if somebody could say a little bit more about the initiatives that will be put in place to tackle the concern about the quality of social work supervision, because it is something that's been there for quite some time, I think, really. So I just don't know if there's anybody who could make a comment about that and say what you're doing to tackle that particular issue. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that as well, Celia. It's Vicky again. So I think just to put that into context, if I could, what the letter, and I think in particular the feedback to us throughout the inspection provided for, was a position that social workers are just about consistently reported very positively on the quality of their supervision and told inspectors that they found it very helpful in assisting them to problem solve and to practice well. I think what inspectors did point out to us is that the quality of the recording of that supervision was not always sufficient to demonstrate that, really, in the context of the child's file. And I think what we know is that our supervision recordings, and we know this through audit, and I read all of the supervision records that went to inspectors, and what I can tell you is that they are very lengthy, they are very detailed, there is significant narrative in there, but I think what inspectors were referring to is that this is now about better if. So the better if for us in Wakefield is if we can enable our managers to find a way of succinctly and clearly recording some of those discussions that they have around resolving professional dilemmas, around how they help social workers to problem solve and unstick difficulties in casework. Some of the stuff that they would refer to as more reflective and analytical in the context of supervision. So the work that we're doing in that regard has already begun. We've put in place a programme for managers linked to the neglect training that we've rolled out for practitioners. and that has an element within it that helps them to look at not only how they carry out direct supervision, but how they then think about reducing that to paper and recording some of that more intangible, more critical and analytical discussion. And we also are sort of sharpening our audit focus around supervision to look for that particularly. We've also put in place a coaching programme for some managers, and that's begun in the south east of the district with the Hemsworth and Crafton teams. Does that help, Celia?
Yes, no, that sounds good, and thanks for that feedback, because it's obviously something that's been there for a while, but it looks as though there's quite a lot going on. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Right, thanks a lot, Vicky. Right, if we hadn't had the hold up, we would now be able to reach our 10-minute break. So we would have been bang on time. So anyway, can I ask for the cameras to be switched off, please, while we have a 10-minute break? Oh, sorry, Kath, you've got a question. And Andy, didn't see those coming up. And Andy, can you ask a question then, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, it occurred to me while we were talking about the impact on children or young people who may be considered homeless. I just wondered, bearing in mind the fact that it's been a peculiar COVID year, whether there have been any issues arising from the children of the population of traveller or refugee families.
I'll try and answer that. I think the answer is not that we know of. I think not specifically from traveller families. I think what we know nationally, and you'll know this from your own sort of contact with the national media, I'm sure, is that there is an increasing demand around accommodation for unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and we're working with regional partners, regional colleagues, to provide accommodation where that's possible to do so. But I think that's a challenge nationally. I don't think there's any additional challenge as a result of the pandemic in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Kath?
Hello, Vicky. It's mentioned on page 18 about personal educational plans and EET plans lacking ambition, and I'm just concerned. We've mentioned mental health earlier. Because of COVID this year, I'm concerned that the mental health and the PEPs and the EET training plans lacking ambition, what's happened with those? How much extra work are you having to put into those to try and ensure that young people are still looking forward to the future and being able to gain employment or training?
I mean, I can maybe start on this, Kath, and it might be that Andy wants to add something. But I guess what I'd say about this is this was one of the areas we knew going into this this focused visit that we got additional work to do on. I think for obvious reason, this year PEPs have been a particular challenge. The PEP issue was confounded for us a little bit because we just introduced a new electronic system for dealing with PPE. I've got PPE on the brain for personal education plans for PEPs, and so we did have some additional challenge, I guess, in that regard. I think what I will say about this is that there was something about the sample that inspectors saw. So many of the PEPs that they were looking at were related to care leavers rather than children in mainstream education, and that is more of a challenge for us. And I think that links to some of the feedback we had and that we already knew around the need to sort of build our offer for care leavers around education, employment and training. And that's a particular part of our care leaver implementation plan now, Kath. So we're working very closely with the young people with corporate colleagues. We're building links with the private sector in Wakefield and with partners around all of the opportunities that we know there should be, and hopefully will be more of going forward. But the context doesn't help, I think, but notwithstanding that, we've got very ambitious plans. It's about getting those sort of to be implemented and to land on the ground for individual young people. I think what I will say positively is that we know that some of that has begun. So we did get some very good feedback again from inspectors on individual young people that they saw and spoke to around their experiences, young people who have had real success in apprenticeships, in further and higher education. So there are examples of kids that are doing very well. We know that there's more, though, that we can do in this regard. There is an implementation plan around the whole care leaver offer that picks up this issue around employment, education and training, and that's certainly very much on the agenda of the Corporate Parenting Committee. I don't know if Andy wants to say anything on that.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I mean, just to back up what Vicky said, so we know that PEPs are a real focus for us, and we've seen, I think, significant improvement now in the quality of PEPs, both just before inspection and after, he says, with the new system that we've introduced. And obviously virtual school is working very closely with the teams in Vicky's directorate around how we progress this. So I think that's really positive now. I think a positive across the whole pandemic has been the attendance of children in care at school. So the last figures that I saw were around 92%, which I think is a fantastic piece of work by all involved to ensure that those young people are in school and getting the education they deserve. As Vicky said, we've got a real sharp focus around education, employment and training via the NEAT strategic board. So there's a real join up around our children in care in particular, and as Vicky says, particularly those who are leaving care, and ensuring that they've got a pathway into education and employment. And so that's all of a real sharp focus of work that we've got. And I think we feel that there is more to do, as said, but we feel that we're making significant progress in these areas, notwithstanding the challenges around the pandemic that we've got currently.
Right. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Vicky. I would just consider mental health as well. If they don't feel valued, to be able to get a job or go into training or education. Thanks ever so much.
If I can just say something else on that last point again. I think I'm much more comfortable and confident around the work we're doing on mental health, and I think we've heard earlier that the work we've done, particularly around children in care and their mental health, is really beginning to make a difference to kids. So we've got the emotional and mental health, mental health wellbeing team in children's social care, working sort of shoulder to shoulder with the assertive outreach team in CAMS, and they collectively screen every young person who has an SDQ score, so our assessment tool, indicating that they may require some level of emotional or mental health support. And we know our children in care are not waiting any longer than 4 weeks for an intervention from either one of those services now. We're auditing that work. We understand the extent to which we're making a difference. That's in place up to 18. Now, what we're doing in line with our care leaver implementation plan is looking to extend that so that we offer across CAMS and social care some further help to young people beyond their 18th birthday, so they don't drop off the edge of a cliff. And I think that will really help, as you say, to strengthen their well-being so that they can move on into independence and meet their potential with some emotional help if that's what's needed for them. So we're not quite there with the care leaver part of that, but certainly for children in care up to 18, we know that that's making a real difference now.
Thanks, Vicky. It sounds very positive what you're doing. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Right, thank you. I better ask, are there any other questions? Right, okay. We'll go for the break now. It's timed at 11:23 because obviously we're running behind because of the delays at the start. Can we come back at 11:30, please? Can you for Partnerships, Education and Inclusion. Abigail. Right. I'll start again, just in case. Strengthening inclusion, agenda items 7, pages 23 to 45. Can I welcome Andy Lancashire, Service Director for Partnerships, Education and Inclusion. Abigail Mulligan, who is the Service Manager, Alternative Provision for Wakefield, Safeguarding Children's Partnership, and this is your first scrutiny, so welcome, Abby. And Claire Hammerson, who is School Inclusion Team and Education Welfare Service Management. The team's been invited to give an update on the ongoing work to improve inclusion and to present the annual Exclusion Report, which is included with your papers. You'll know that also that we have been sort of looking at the elective home education, the sort of questions asked at the last meeting with regards to that, and overturned exclusions, which will also be provided. Abby, I am advised that you will be giving the presentation.
Yes, that's right. Good morning. Hi. Am I able to screen share?
Yes, you can. Over to you.
While I'm doing that, I don't know if Andy wants to say anything to start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Abby. Thanks, David, for the introductions. Abby and Claire are obviously going to lead members through the obviously the exclusions report and obviously the a little bit of background information around the work that we've been doing to reduce both permanent and fixed term exclusions via the work we've been doing around inclusion, and that's very clearly cited in terms of the inclusion panels, cited within the Wakefield Families Together approach and the work that we've been doing around the team around the school and our locality teams and how they're organised. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Abby and then Claire, who will lead you through the PowerPoint, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions after that.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm hoping you can all see my screen. Can I just have a bit of confirmation that that's the case?
You can see some of it. I think it probably needs to go onto the presentation because we've got the screens, the shots on the side. So we're only seeing part of it.
Ah, right, okay. Can you see my first slide in that case?
You can see the part of it. It's yes.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. As long as you've got that, that's fine. And we won't be presenting the whole way through. Part of this presentation, it pertains to the annual exclusions report, and that is with Claire Hammerson, and it came out in your papers. So just to introduce myself, I'm the Service Manager for Alternative Provision, and I'm here with my colleague Claire Hammerson, who was referred to earlier. We've got 30 minutes for this item, so it's quite tight in terms of what we've got to get through. So just briefly, I'm going to introduce and just give some context around the annual exclusions report, and then Claire will give a brief elective home education update. She'll then run through the exclusions report, and just to note, that's from September 2019 to July 2020. So, it's from last academic year. And then following from that, I'll give an update for autumn term, just so you've got the current situation and position. And then obviously we'll be open to questions as well. So just to start us off, a little bit of context around the exclusions report itself. So at the same time as we were building up the data through 2019 to 2020, there was a lot of work going on in the background. There's a recognition from local authority and the schools that we had high exclusion figures. We need to do something to review and improve the systems. So an inclusion project was led by Andy Lancashire, but had all heads and CEOs were fully on board with that throughout 2019 to 2020 to create a system that would work to reduce exclusions and make sure children and people had the support that they needed as well as schools. So that was true partnership working the whole way through, particularly from education and inclusion, from social care and head teachers. And we were guided by key principles that we signed up to together: collective responsibility, proactivism, responsiveness to our local needs, that we were all going to be supportive of inclusion, and what we did was going to be high quality and effective. So that's a little bit of background about what was going on throughout that year as we built up the exclusions data that we saw last year. And just to let you know, there's some limitations with the data that we're going to share, because first of all, that time period includes the initial COVID period. So you can't really compare that to previous years or to this year because of that. And also the other thing to say is that we launched our our efforts and our improvements in September 2020. So again, all of that that's happened since 2020 isn't reflected in the data that Claire's going to present. So I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Claire. She's going to give you a brief elective home education update, and then she's going to go through the annual exclusions report with you. Thanks. Over to Claire.
Thanks, Abby. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Claire.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so firstly, just briefly on elective home education, just to give some background. Some parents or carers may decide to provide a suitable education by educating their child at home rather than seeking to enrol their child at a school. This is elective home education, and that parent or carer will then take full responsibility for the education of their child. I must stress this is different to the current virtual remote homeschooling currently happening during the pandemic. We get referrals that come in from parents to home educate. We make contact and we give advice and support and signpost to different resources that may be available. And also we do monitor that level of education, but we do have a very limited role in that in the local authority. The Wakefield Elective Home Education team operates through the Education Welfare Service, and we have seen an increase in numbers since the start of the pandemic. We are addressing these accordingly, and it's important to say this is reflected both regionally and nationally for home education. I'll go on now to the Exclusions Report that I believe you've all had sight of previously.
Yes, so, we have.
Yeah, for obviously regular attenders, this is the usual annual report, but prepared under very unusual circumstances. And it would be difficult to base anything on these figures, but over the next few years, we should be able to begin to make comparators to previous years as we come out of the pandemic, and the work of the inclusion panel is embedded in practice. So to take you through the report, page 2 details the work of the school exclusion team. We've had numerous calls, we've given guidance to heads, governors, parents. We've got the exclusion helpline we run 5 days a week, and we've given extensive guidance this year, including on how to hold remote governing board meetings to review exclusions to ensure legal compliance, whilst also ensuring parents and pupils fully engaged in the process. We sometimes find ourselves acting in the role as broker between school and parent, where the relationship may have broken down, and we advise parents and carers on the exclusion process and talk through some of the alternatives to exclusion that school may be offering. In the team, we've managed to avoid at least a further 16 permanent exclusions by working with schools to look at creative solutions and support, or by offering rigorous challenge at the governors' meeting for permanent exclusion. Some of you here I know are governors of those meetings, so you know how we operate. The school exclusion team, to put it in a context, it's an impartial service of the local authority that collects all the exclusion data and ensures schools are following the legal process and parents are aware of their right to make representation. We've been disseminating national guidance to schools throughout the pandemic regarding changing timescales and policy, and we've also been developing our virtual legal exclusion training programme to governors, which will be rolling out this term to cover local schools and academy trusts and some trusts operating within the region. There is some paragraphs there about permanent exclusion and fixed period exclusion, the summary. So this year we've had 68 permanent exclusions from 83 the year before, 6 permanent exclusions in primary, no permanent exclusions in special schools for 12 years. The top 3 reasons are detailed there. And like I said before, it is difficult to draw exact comparisons to the last few years due to the COVID pandemic. Fixed period exclusions, there's been a decrease. The number of fixed period exclusions of pupils overall has decreased from 2,150 to 1,686, and the number of days lost has decreased. But again, it's difficult to draw those comparisons. If we go to page 6, table 1 and 2, you'll see the permanent and fixed period exclusion. We can see they are reduced again, and we have broken that down by term as well in later tables, but you can see those numbers there, and then also how we figure against the school population. Page 7 for the figures, table 3, we see damage there for the first time featured in the top 3 reasons due to incidents involving a few pupils in one incident, so that's why that figure is higher there. Page 8, table 4, this details one-off and cumulative permanent exclusions. So I'll just talk you through this one. So for permanent exclusions 2019-2020, column A, that is for one-off incidents, and column B is for cumulative incidents, and we can see that's actually evened out this last year. If you can see from previous years, there was quite a difference between those figures, so that's evened out this year. If we go to page 10, table 6, this gives the reasons for permanent exclusion. Mainly it's for disruption, and the work of the panels in the future, the inclusion panels for both primary and secondary, will help to avoid these permanent exclusions. If we go to page 12, table 8, this shows the gender breakdown of those pupils being permanently excluded. We can see for young boys it's mainly year 9 and year 10, and for girls it's year 8 and year 9. You can see the difference there from previous years. And if we go to page 14, table 10, this is the fixed period exclusions by reason and days lost using the DFE codes. I will stress these are the codes that the DFE give to us. This is what every local authority has to report on. And we can see in primary, the top reasons there, physical assault against an adult and persistent disruptive behaviour. And for secondary, that is persistent disruptive behaviour as well. So we can see those figures there throughout the last few years of the exclusion codes. There are some new codes that have been introduced this year, and we've made sure that schools are fully aware of those new codes that the DFE have given all local authorities. If we go to table 11, page 15, what we can see here is if we're looking for children in care, this is probably a true reflective number because those children would have most likely been in school. So we can see if we look at the number of pupils 2019-2020 is 43, the previous year was 45. So this is probably the most accurate comparator of previous years despite COVID. If we look at page 13, page 16, table 13, this gives details of secondary school fixed period exclusion as a breakdown by term. So that's useful to see there. And then table 14, page 17 onwards, gives details of all primary schools by term for last year and whether there's been an exclusion or not. It's important to note here, there can be repeat exclusions of a pupil. So, for example, just to pull one out, Carlton Park Junior and Infant School had 9 incidents, but when you look at that, it's actually only related to 2 pupils. So it's important to look carefully at these figures. This does detail every school. So for a number of those schools, those figures will be 0. It probably wouldn't be fair to discuss individual schools in this forum, but all the relevant discussions would take place with schools, including suggested referrals to other services. And of course, when we have the inclusion panel work developed and embedded, we do hope to see certainly a change in these figures for exclusions. Are there any questions?
Yeah, can I ask one question, Claire?
Yeah.
One of the figures that jumps out at me is the number of exclusions for year 9 pupils. Is that anything to do with the fact now that it's becoming fairly commonplace for high schools to start their GCSE programs in year 9?
I think there are probably a number of reasons, and yes, that is probably a factor within it, but I do believe there are a number of reasons why it may be that particular year group. That's certainly reflected nationally for that year group as well.
Right, thanks. Are there any other questions for Claire? Kath, off you go.
Just as an add-on to what your last question was, David, having been a chair of a behaviour and discipline committee for a long time, year 9 does seem to crop up quite often over the last 30 years that I've been doing it. Claire, my question is, on table 7, you've highlighted what the exclusions were around, but I'm glad to see that there's none on bullying, race and racial abuse, and that seems to be across the board. Do you know is the work going on in schools around this? I'm hoping it's not covered up anyway, But do you think there's work going on in schools, and do we do work with schools around these subjects?
Yeah, absolutely, Kath. Thanks for the question. I think certainly that is the case. There's a lot of work that goes on in schools around making sure that there's bullying is reduced, it's addressed, it's tackled, and as well as racial abuse. And you'll know as well from when we challenge at the meetings, we look for any underlying factors of why a pupil is permanently excluded. Have they been bullied themselves, or have they been involved in any bullying? So we do make sure we raise those questions. But yes, that is very encouraging to see, literally for the last 3 years, and I think before that as well, we haven't seen permanent exclusions for that reason, and I think that is down to the good work in schools.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. It's on table 13. There may be a very simple explanation, but just looking at the data with regard to Featherstone and with regard to Outwood in the percentage of pupils fixed period exclusions. Is there any information as to why, without obviously breaching any confidentiality, why those percentages seem disproportionately high?
I think some schools have taken an approach whereby rather than put in one exclusion of 5 days, they may, as part of their policy, put in 5 exclusions of 1 day. So the pupil is receiving fewer days exclusion to try and encourage the pupil to be in school more. But the policy may be amended so that the pupil is receiving fewer days, but they may be receiving repeat exclusions, which then would affect the percentage of pupils on the school roll figure there.
That would make it, forgive me, that makes it difficult for comparison, doesn't it? If different schools are working in different ways.
And it is for schools to set their own behaviour policy on exclusions. There is no national policy on that. It is guidance, and then schools do set their own policy relating to the standards they want within the school.
So I just wondered whether, if that happens, whether that's flagged up as it is from the table, whether any sort of follow-up happens with regard to yourselves in order to just to check out exactly what is going on.
Yes, we certainly do that follow-up, and then also with the work of the inclusion panel, because that's a cooperative and collaborative approach with head teachers. Should it be that there are pupils receiving repeat exclusions, that is something that will be challenged at the inclusion panel, as well as the governing board meeting, in terms of repeat exclusions for pupils, and certainly something we would challenge in our conversations with schools, head teachers, governors, and also part of the supportive strategy with parents.
So if, finally, without dominating this, in which case are you comfortable, if you can use the word comfortable, with that table, in that there are no particular issues identified, just solely that different schools are identifying exclusions in different ways, but there isn't a massive difference that should concern you?
I think certainly there'll be a number of different people within the Children and Young People Service that will look at these figures when they come out, and to look at what extra support and guidance they can give to schools.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, Claire. Are there any other questions for Claire? Okay, Abby, did you say you were going to come back?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I'll come back now, and I think I will share my screen as well, and talk to you a little bit more about what's happened since the data that's been shared on that report. So again, just bear with me, because I know it takes a moment for the screen to share fully.
Thank you.
So hopefully you can see this now, and I'm just returning to table 3 on the data, just to draw your attention to what happened in 2019 to 20 during the time of that report. So hopefully you can see that, and I'm kind of drawing your attention here to the totals for permanent exclusions. And you can see through last year we had a drop in permanent exclusions as we went into the partial closures of schools. And when you compare that to the previous year, you can see that the drop off in permanent exclusions it does match up with that period. But we were aware at the point of kind of halfway through spring term that we would have been, I think, probably on course for the same or more permanent exclusions during last year if it hadn't been for other things happening nationally. So just really, again, just putting that into a little bit of context, those figures. So let's talk now about what has happened since the launch of the new panels system in September 2020. So the panels are held in localities for secondary schools. There are 3 localities, and they're in line with Wakefield Families Together. Within those panels, we have a variety of representatives from different areas of the local authority and schools. We have had complete attendance from all head teachers and some academy CEOs as well at all those locality panels for secondary. In primary, the system's slightly different because we have so many primary schools involved. But again, head teachers are on board with it, and we have head teachers from primaries on the strategy group who attend those meetings every time. So within each panel meeting, schools can request support for particular pupils who might be at risk of permanent exclusion, and then that pupil is discussed holistically amongst the agencies there. So that includes, for example, social care, children's first hubs, educational psychology, special educational needs support services, and so on. So that there are a wide variety of people there. And then according to a continuum of the inclusion need for that pupil, a decision is made as to what support can be put in by the local authority, and also advice is given amongst the head teacher peers on that panel, but also from local authority representatives as to what the school can do as well. We've also held 3 primary district-wide panels. So we have a support offer in place that includes, for example, therapeutic intervention. We're also piloting a training offer for inclusion for all schools at the moment. Again, slightly held up, that one will be, I think, because of the current situation, but nonetheless, it is being piloted. So far we've discussed around 50 plus pupils by all partners present, and we've allocated the support and services in line with their need. We also have now pupils reintegrating into mainstream who have been previously permanently excluded. So again, the panel discusses those pupils. We look at the preferences of parents in terms of mainstream schools, and then we look to place them in a really supportive package back into a mainstream school with their agreement. And again, schools have been brilliant to get us on board with that and offer places, and have worked really closely with services to reintegrate those pupils successfully. In terms of figures, I drew your attention just now to how the figures looked throughout the last year. For autumn term, schools were fully open, and so we think it's fair to compare with the previous autumn term in 2019 because of that. So in 2019, in autumn term, we had 39 permanent exclusions across the district, and in autumn term 2020, we've had 11. So you can see a drop already. Of course, we need more time to make sure that those changes have been embedded. And we also need to continuously improve what we're doing. I'm not saying it's a finished article that's perfect, and probably it never will be, because we just need to keep listening to feedback and being responsive to the needs of pupils and young people across the district. So that's the position that we're in now. I have to say, this has been a true partnership. It's been everybody working together, and so I do need to give thanks to everybody who's worked hard in the local authority and the schools across the district. And we will continue to work in partnership using our strategy group meetings and being open to feedback from everybody across the system. So I wanted I'll stop presenting now, and just wondered if you had any questions around that.
Has anybody got any questions from the committee? Kevin, over to you.
Yes, it was just to clarify which agencies again were involved in these locality panels, and whether the agencies were focused narrowly on the kind of behaviour and experience of the pupil in the school, or whether the actual agencies involved went a bit wider into the community.
Thank you for that. Yeah, good question. So when the system is complete, which is when the Wakefield Families Together rollout has completed, that all of those involvements will be at an earlier level. So our particular focus as a panel is it's on those pupils who are right on the brink of permanent exclusion, and we would expect when they come to panel that all those additional agencies have been involved, and we'll be accessing the information from them. So, for example, social care, we have a service manager at every meeting who can access all of that information and feed in and give advice. So yes, we do have all those agencies involved, but for example, we wouldn't invite police or health, because that would be at a different level, and we would be using the information that would come in through social care or schools or all the other local authority agencies that are there.
I think it's hi Kevin, it's Andy. I think it's important to add as well to if you like, the inclusion panels are part of the system of meetings that we've got associated with Wakefield Families Together. So I think it's a really good point that you make. So with Wakefield Families Together, we have a meeting called the Team Around the School, and it's at that meeting that you have a multi-agency approach to a young person. And then, as Abby says, if we're still having issues with a young person within school, that we need to provide a greater level of support. So, as Abby says, they're in danger of permanent exclusion. We can bring all this information to bear and make even more reasonable adjustments to the provision that we can make for that young person. And that, I think, since September, that appears, certainly the figures seem to demonstrate that it's having a positive impact. And as Abby says, this is a system that we will continue to evolve in terms of the services that are there to support schools holistically with young people. And as I say, I think you make a really important point that we need to ensure that we have strong links with the police, with health, with the youth offending team, and so on and so forth. And that is the objective of Wakefield Families Together. So this isn't a piece of work that's separate from that. It's inextricably linked and appears to be having a positive impact at present.
Thank you, Kevin. I'd have to sort of say, I think obviously Andy knows my views on this one, and that is that I think the inclusion panel is a very important step forward, I think, for the workings of the children's services, because I think, as I say, it does bring a lot of elements together, and it will work successfully to reduce exclusion. So I think I see it's been a very important step forward. Right, Kath, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that 4 pupils are being reintegrated from PRUs into mainstream school. Is this an average, or should there have been more, or is this more than what we usually have?
So we've never had a system before, a formal system for reintegration. So this is more, so we've had 4 in one term. So that's from a baseline of 0, I think, for autumn term, if you want to compare to 2019. So it's a huge step forward.
So do we know how many usually are reintegrated into mainstream?
Yes, as I said, 0 for autumn 2019, for example. So usually we haven't had a system for doing it before, so therefore none.
Okay, thank you.
I think I'd also like to sort of say that has been something which has been a real cause for concern, that once a child had gone into the PRUs, that was it, they weren't having a way back. So I think, again, this is a very positive step forward. Andy?
Definitely, yeah.
Andy?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. On your final slide, Abby, was obviously a very favourable comparison between autumn, where you made the comparison between autumn 19 and autumn 20. And I just wondered, because autumn 20, clearly there's been problems with regard to attendance generally, are we actually comparing oranges and oranges there?
Can I just jump in? I think, thanks, Andy. I think it's a really good question. I think our attendance figure for the autumn term was at national average, so around 85%, I think, if memory serves. So I think certainly through the pandemic, if you like, schools have ensured that young people have been coming in. So I think we feel comfortable in that comparison. It is early days in terms of the inclusion panels, but I think the important thing is that, as I was sort of reiterating before, really, this is a very joined up approach. So the difference is that we now have schools and academies on board. They are working very, very much in terms of their peer-to-peer support for each other and challenge as part of the channels, which I think is making a significant difference, but it's then placed within a real clear sense of the support that's available for a young person, and that's got to be a multi-agency approach before. And going back to Kevin's point, it's got to be wider than just what's happening within the school for a young person's life. So you know, we're cautiously optimistic with this piece of work that it's going to continue to enable us to keep young people in school, and also enable us to develop, if you like, that turnaround provision, whereby, as David was suggesting, that, you know, someone doesn't just disappear into the crew, they come back out and they're supported. And it links very much to the work that we're trying to do around employment and education and training as well, so that we've got coherent pathways for young people, and we support them into becoming independent citizens, essentially. So cautiously optimistic, and I think it's been a positive start, but I think we can compare, yeah.
Catherine.
Thank you.
Catherine?
Hello. Claire, on the children with pupils with a EHCP plan, is there any that's been permanently excluded? And if so, in what age groups? Do we know?
Yeah, sorry, just getting that figure up for you. In terms of those pupils with an education healthcare plan, last year there was only, I believe, one, but I can get that data for you.
No, that's fine. Just one.
That's permanent exclusion.
Permanent exclusion. What year?
Again, I would have to go into a different set of stats. I can get that and produce that.
Right. Okay, thanks ever so much, Claire.
Can I come back on, you know, obviously where you've had in the past, we've talked about the children who have been opting for home education. Have you, and I know nationally there has been an increase, partly I think it's because of COVID. I think the figures have gone from like 50,000+.
How many have got EHCP plans? Do we know?
There's 0.75% of the population are electively home educated, and of that 0.75%, there's only 3.7% of those that have an education healthcare plan. And there's strong links with our special educational needs team on that, so that education healthcare plan is obviously statutorily reviewed as it should be.
Right. So, do we know what percentage in our district? Well, that national, what you just gave me.
No, that's in our district. In our district, 0.7% of pupils are electively home educated, and of that 0.7%, 3.7% of those have an education and healthcare plan.
Right. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Claire.
No problem.
Right, I'm going to draw that element part of the agenda now to a conclusion, because we are running a little bit late. Not too bad, but we are running a bit late. So can I thank you for Stuart? You typing a question.
I'll just say quickly, Chair, I think that was a really, really informative report and some good data there and some good explanation behind the data as well, and some real positive moves. I just want to make that comment, that's all. I think it was really good.
Thank you, Stuart. You've saved me from saying that. So yeah, you know, I have to say that obviously in the past, well, obviously Kath and I have known Claire's work for a long time, and nothing but praise for it. And so thank you very much for that, and thank you as well for Abby and obviously Andy for leading in this, because this is a big step forward for the authority. So thank you very much for all that work. Okay, can we go on? Is there anything else? No. All right. Can we go on to agenda item 8, please, which is the quality assurance from Vicky? Are you going to?
Yeah, I'm going to try and present my screen. I'm not terribly competent technically, though, so if you let me know when you can see it, that would be helpful.
It's all right. I would be saying exactly the same. Very good.
Can anybody see anything yet?
Yes, we can see it.
You can see it. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Well done.
That's the difficult bit for me. So I'll run through this fairly quickly. A lot of this I know that members are now well aware of. I know you understand the reason for the quality assurance framework and the reasons why it's so important. As I've said before, it's one of the key elements that led to some of the inadequate findings in 2018. Just the fact that there wasn't the visibility around the quality of practice. So just a reminder around our process. You know that there are multiple elements to our quality assurance work. And though we report to you in detail on the relatively small sample of cases that populate the full audit, there is an awful lot more information that sits behind our evaluation of practice than that. So this is really a balance between volume and detail, and the full audit sample frame gives us the detailed view. The other work that we do, the management dip samples, the work of our conference chairs and independent reviewing officers, and lots of the other partnership audit work give us lots more around quality, lots more around volume, so that we can get a broad look at the nature of our practice in different areas. The work that our conference chairs and reviewing officers do means that every child and young person on a child protection plan or subject of a child in care arrangement has a quality assurance process every 3 months at the review or midway between reviews. So every 3 months their file will have a look by a conference chair and or reviewing officer. And the partnership audits, just to say a little bit more about that, though they aren't in huge volume, they've been really helpful in ensuring that we've carried out some significant improvement work in some of the areas which are very dependent on good quality partnership work. So just as an example of that, some of that you can see reflected in the Ofsted letter around the Section 47 investigations of child abuse and the improvements that we've made there. They've been one of the real focuses of the partnership audit work. So this then, just to give you an overview of the number of cases that we look at, you can see last year up to the end of March 2020, we looked at 845 records. We looked at an awful lot of volume in March to June 2020, and as you'll recall, that was about the need for us to assure ourselves in the context of the pandemic that we were still operating to a sufficient standard. And then June to September, which is what the remainder of this presentation focuses on, we looked at 321 records of practice with children. So this is just an overview around the thematic areas that were considered in July, August and September. Not exhaustive, but these are the main areas that we focused on during that time. And then this breaks that down for you, so how much we did in each of those areas. So you can see that we did 40 detailed audits. The 40 are our full audits. The next step samples focused on care leavers. We looked at 8 records of foster carers, 10 records around children with complex care needs. The best practice dip samples involve a whole range of practice areas, including re-referrals, including some of those partnership processes around investigations of abuse. And then the safeguarding and review unit refers to the work of the conference chairs and reviewing officers that I mentioned earlier. And then you can see the findings there. So July to September, we had 1 inadequate case. We had in September we had 1 inadequate case, and then you can see there in July and September we've got reasonably comparable levels of good and requires improvement work. But the real positive, I think, here for us now is that the good outcomes really are beginning to significantly sort of outweigh the requires improvement outcomes. So we are seeing more good quality practice. And this breaks that down for you then into judgments around practice areas. So this is just giving you a little bit more detail around the types of practice we're seeing that we think are particularly strong and the areas where we think we've got particular improvements to make. So you can see there that the areas that we're performing fairly well in are in relation to risk management. If you're looking for a higher proportion of green than red or blue. So certainly child's voice comes across very strongly. Risk management is coming across fairly strongly. And I think what we know is, and what you've heard reflected through much of the discussion today, is that one of the areas that we really are focusing on and trying to get rid of any residual inadequate practice is in that area around planning, where you can see we've probably got slightly more work to do. This gives you the overview of outcomes and judgments from audits over time. So what you can see is that if we go right back to July and September 2019, we were recording there just over 20% of the judgments were identified as inadequate. Now, in July to September 2020, we're down at 2% of judgments being inadequate, which is obviously a much improved position. And similarly, if you look at that good trajectory, so the green line there, you can see that the amount of practice we were identifying as in the good range was somewhere around 15% back in July to September 2019. And for the first time, really, in this quarter, we've got way above 50% of our outcomes judged as good based on this audit work. So that's obviously a real positive from our point of view. Just a reminder about governance, again, just back to process. As you know, we produce quarterly audit reports. They collate the thematic learning from a range of processes, including the quality assurance process, but also from some of the young people-led challenge, and also from processes like complaints and compliments, so that we take a rounded view of the information that we have to evaluate ourselves on. Those reports are obviously then available for scrutiny, and in particular are made available to the Improvement Board. And what we then do is use all of that information in order to drive our learning practice. So I've just included a little bit in this presentation about learning, because the quality assurance framework is really only one element of the move towards improvement. I guess this is the culture now that we're working towards embedding within the service, that not only do we audit, that we feedback and challenge and question and support and help each other to learn, including developing the materials and training programs that will help our staff and partners, and then we help them also to put that into practice. And then this continuous cycle takes place where we reevaluate and understand the difference that that's made. Just something about learning priorities then to build on that, and hopefully you'll see that these very much overlap with the areas that Ofsted also identified, which, as we've already said, were based very much on our own self-assessment. So the real focus now going forward and arising from all of that quality assurance work we've done is in order to embed a consistency around plans and interventions. So really helping people to do the things that make a difference for children. And I guess very much the mantra is now that we leave children in a better place than we find them. And that's really what the focus of the work around plans is about. We've talked already about the bespoke learning offer we've put in place around domestic abuse, and that's for practitioners and managers, and the partnership, around neglect. But we are moving on to develop exactly the same approach then to domestic abuse and adolescent risk. And the domestic abuse programme will begin later early this year in February, and the adolescent risk programme is intended to kick off sometime around Easter. We've already talked about the improved care leaver offer and some learning materials that are in place in that regard. There's a specific focus on continuing the work that we've begun around life story work for children in care, and a specific focus on all of the work that helps to prevent placement disruption for children in care and promote their stability with consistent carers. And then finally, again, we've already mentioned today the work that we're doing to drive forward that refreshed focus on supervision. and helping managers not only to carry that out in person, but to create records that reflect what they're doing. And then I guess a quote, a comment from the Ofsted letter, which I know we've talked about at length today, but just to put into context what we've managed to achieve, but also then again where we know we've still got to go. So a greatly improved performance management information and more rigorous approach to quality assurance provide a much clearer picture of the experiences and progress of children and families, helping to improve the quality of practice. But I think, as we've said throughout, achieving greater consistency is the key challenge, and that's really what we're trying to drive through these processes. And then there's a summary there for you. I'll just leave that with you, and I guess if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things from me. Thanks, Vicky, for that presentation. It certainly is a lot more positive now than we were looking at a couple of years ago. When you going back to the sampling that you do, what was the sort of correlation then between the sampling of your team and Ofsted? How did they sort of compare with each other in terms of outcomes?
Very well, David. I think what we do every year, as you'll know, it's an annual self-assessment, and we'd actually just completed our self-assessment, and we're expecting an annual conversation with Ofsted just at the same time that we got the notification for the inspection to be carried out. So our self-assessment actually was sort of the way in which we approached the inspection. We'd already carried out that process, and I think when we read our self-assessment and the letter that Ofsted provided together, they are very much on all fours with each other. We didn't have a significant disagreement about the quality of practice or the areas in which we need to improve. And actually, I think it's fair to say that for some time, since very early on in the focused visits, Ofsted have confirmed to us that our ways of auditing and quality assuring our work very much mirror their ways of doing that. So we are confident that the judgments that we're reaching around practice are the right ones and are at the same level and standard that the inspectorate apply.
Right, brilliant. Just one little bit from me then. Where you picked up on that inadequate one that you referred to on one of your slides, if that's the case, do you then sort of tend to look at other files for that person or that area as well, just to assure it's just a one-off?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that the audits are carried out is that the service managers in each service area have a total oversight of all of the audits that that have happened, and they are very much involved in carrying out what we call moderations. So they will check the audit, the first audit of the file, and ensure that they agree with that. So there's a check and a balance in the process. And the service managers will then discuss with the team managers and the social workers what action needs to be taken, and remedial action, any remedial action that's required on children's cases will be tracked through to a conclusion. In the event that there's a broader concern about a member of staff, then yes, their work will be more thoroughly sampled, I guess, and that would come from the oversight of the service manager.
Right, thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Andy.
Thank you. It's not. I'm not sure what the solution to this is, but it's just an observation about pupil and young people's voice. In the report, children and young people reported that they felt listened to, and so Ofsted clearly validates and supports the actions and the strategies that your team has. We benefit from the fact that Ofsted are being quite frequent observers of our practice at the moment, and at some point it won't be the case. I'm not sure quite how best we as a scrutiny committee can kind of triangulate, and as a school governor I could, under normal circumstances, check out with regard to the pupil's voice. I'm not sure how best to do that with regard to the work that's being done within the district at the moment, or once Ofsted move on and aren't as frequent visits. So it's just an observation. I don't know what the solution is, but at the moment we get the vital signs records activity of your colleagues and staff. But I would be interested to see if there's any way of getting a better picture as a scrutiny committee of the children and young people's voice.
I think it's a really good point. I think there are a number of processes that we've tried to establish, as you'll know, that allow you as members to be able to exercise your scrutiny functions. So I know that one of those is obviously the leadership visit programme. There's obviously the committee focus for children in care, and we've obviously got the young people that feed into that process as well. But I think, you know, obviously I'm sure Stephen's on the call as well. But if there are additional ways that members feel that they can be helped to scrutinise and challenge and be assured, I think we're always available to that discussion.
Yeah, I think it's fair comment there, Andy, because obviously it is something that we have been talking about working into the future. So it is something we're looking at. But I think it's a good point that. Kath.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, just looking at the EHCP plans, and we are in 2019. We were higher than statistical neighbour. And I'm just wondering, with the EHCP plans, how many parents or carers ask for an EHCP plan, but they don't get a positive response? They don't get an EHCP plan. What percentage do we have of those? What number?
Are you going to deal with that, Andy?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Cal. I don't know from my head, but I know Julie Kelly will have. In terms of the requests that come into panel, those that are turned down as part of that process. So we can have a look at that and see if we can provide that data for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks ever so much, Andy.
Right. More questions? Okay. Thanks. Right, Vicky, yours is the next agenda item, again on vital signs. Now, I am conscious of the fact that members of committee have had this paper in advance, so I don't know if there's anything you want to specifically draw attention to, Vicky, or do you just want to take questions?
I'm happy if members just want to ask questions. It's obviously a document that you're familiar with, so unless there's anything you specifically want me to report on, David, I'll happily just take questions.
If there's, can I ask on one thing on KPI 7B, quality assurance? Mm-hmm. Key themes arising from audit are identified by service managers to address. Are there any examples you can share with us on that? For example.
Yeah, there's a number of examples, I guess. So linking to some of the things I've just said, one of the things that we are aware of is that the as was identified by Ofsted and as we knew through our own quality assurance activity, we knew that the area around children's plans was one of the things that we needed to do some more work on. And I suppose the issue is not that children don't have plans, they all do have plans, but it's about the extent to which the activities set out in that plan will be sufficient to make a tangible difference to that child within the right time scale. So the work that's now being carried out in that regard, as a result of our auditing oversight, is fairly significant, actually. So it links to the development of the neglect programme. And in addition to that, we've put in place, as I was saying earlier, a programme of coaching for staff and managers in a particular service area, which will help them to embed the materials and use them in practice, and which leads to the very regular auditing of a number of cases so that we can examine the difference being made in practice as a result of that activity. It's with a very practical focus about the kinds of work that make a difference to children and families, so that we can create it, put it in place, test out the difference it's making, and reevaluate that if we're not getting the outcome that we want. So that's one example I could give you. I think another example would be around the work that we're doing with care leavers. So some of the things that have been identified through those care leaver dip samples that we carried out in July and August and September were in relation to some more basic elements of practice, so the way that we're creating records for care leavers, but also some stuff around things that will really make a difference to care leavers in terms of helping them to build their relationships and their networks beyond the personal advisor. So what role does the personal advisor have in helping care leavers to develop their informal network of people who will stay with them and help them, understanding that care leavers don't always have the same support structure that other young people in the general population do. So there's a whole piece of work ongoing around that now. So some fairly basic stuff is addressed through audit, but also it's helping us to be a bit more creative, I think, in lots of ways. Does that help? David?
David, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry.
I was. Sorry. Thank you very much for that, BRC. It's the first time I've had that said to me this year. Probably won't be the last either. Celia's posed a question about the demands on safeguarding as the stats are concerning KP4 on page 53.
Let me just find KPI4. Just bear with me 1 second. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So this is about caseloads. Our caseloads have held fairly steady, actually, during the pandemic. I think what you can see there is obviously for the safeguarding service, there's a little number. There's a relatively small number of staff who are holding caseloads between 20 and 25, and a very small number at between 26 and 30. And what I know is that relates to two teams in particular, where we still have a higher proportion than we would like of agency staff, and we had some turnover in those agency staff during the time frame that this relates to. So, but on average and in usual terms, our staff caseloads have held really steady, and we've been very happy with the level of work that they've been carrying out. So we are, generally speaking, and for the vast majority of the time, maintaining caseloads in line with our target of 20 or under.
Right, thanks.
I think you can also see, sorry, I'll just say, if you look at the volume of work in the service, I think you can also see that that's held fairly steady during the pandemic, and actually in the face of quite a different position in many other local authorities. So we're quite pleased that we've been able to manage our volumes in that way.
Okay, thank you very much. Has there been a problem then over this period of time of supervision of staff and the personal supervision? Has that been a problem, or is it something that you're able to get round?
No, personal and case-based supervision has been carried out, David. I mean, oftentimes that's been virtual, sometimes it's not been face-to-face, but actually our staff have had the option throughout to use office buildings and come into contact physically with colleagues, obviously in a safe way. And we've been clear that we think to some extent that's necessary for people's emotional and mental health, given the kind of work that we do. The levels of supervision, both case-based and personal, have maintained above target throughout the whole pandemic. Where we have had any issue, and there is an issue, I don't think it's within this vital signs report, but just last month with a slight dip in personal supervision. We know that that's about the reporting process. So it's a manual collection of data, and on occasion we've had to reinforce the process for collecting that data, and that's been something we've had to do again just this last month. But we are very confident that supervision is being carried out.
Right, thank you very much. Stuart looks as if he's coming up with a question.
No, David, just to say, give my apologies. I need to leave for another meeting, but
Right,
thank you.
that's
Really,
fine.
really
Yeah,
useful.
understand that. Yeah, but right, we're getting there. Thanks a lot, Stuart.
Thank
Your
you.
input.
Thank you all.
Right. Thank you, Vicky. We'll cut off that point.
Okay.
Thank you very much, because obviously you've been in the hot seat for a while, like BRT was earlier on. Right, corporate parenting. Agenda item number 10, pages 57 to 63. Please note the report and appendix are in the wrong order in the papers. The appendix is on agenda page 57 before the report, which is agenda page 61. Obviously, overview and scrutiny monitor the effectiveness of corporate parenting committee by undertaking quarterly review and receiving copies of minutes. Our next quarterly review is due this month, and Kath and I will be meeting with the Councillor Lorna Malkin, who's the Chair of Corporate Parenting and the Head of Service. You have got, obviously, the minutes. Are there any questions that you'd like to ask on that? Obviously, I'll go for silence on that, so we'll take that. Agenda item number 11, Executive Leaders Forward Plan for Key Decisions, 65 to 68. Again, you've got that information, and we have looked at certainly procurement of children's education management system, had that at the last meeting. And obviously then there's also capital maintenance, roof replacement scheme update, and the creation of a service director post to lead Wakefield Families Together, which BRT referred to in her report, which is going to Cabinet next week. Are there any comments from anybody? Any members? Any comments or questions? Okay, so agenda item 12, which is date and time of the next meeting, which is Thursday the 28th of January at 10 a.m. and again will be held remotely. Can I thank everybody for your input this morning and for your attendance? And can the camera be switched off, please?